Hi everyone, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all my OWLS Readathon wrap-up. So by not playing by the rules entirely, I managed to read 7 books for this readathon, which means I actually managed to read everything I needed to do for in the newts to be able to pursue the profession of a professor, so love that for me. But let's get right to it. The first book I read for this readathon was To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. I read this book for the potions prompt. In this book, we're following the crew of a spaceship which is traveling to different planets in order to catalog alien life. That's essentially the crux of this novella. Basically, I rated this 5 stars because it was beautiful. I loved this little novella. It was written incredibly. I just love Becky Chambers's prose. She just has a way with language, okay? And it just makes for beautiful storytelling. And in general, I really liked the character that we're following in this story. It made the whole novella more enjoyable. And this has an open ending, which might not be for everyone, but I tend to sometimes like those, and I think it worked really well in this one. And in general, for such a short novella, I felt like the pacing was really strong in this. Like, we did jump around through time, but it never felt jarring or confusing. You were never lost in what was going on. And again, for such a short book, the characters in this were pretty well developed and the relationship between them was complex and interesting. So I would definitely recommend picking up this book. The second book I picked up for this readathon was Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wayne. I read this book for the arithmancy prompt, and in this book we're following a spy during World War II. Essentially, this spy gets captured and she's being tortured. And through this torture, she's revealing information about everything she knows about the British Army and flight things. I don't know how else to describe this without actually reading the summary to you all. I rated this book 3 stars because I had a lot of issues reading it personally. For the most part, I did not enjoy this reading experience. I mean, it's a book set in World War II, so it's not like it was gonna be happy, and that's not my point. My point is that I did not vibe with the writing style of this novel. I didn't like the main character. I thought she was unpleasant, unlikable, and for this kind of story, I feel like I needed to like the main character in order to be invested in what was happening to her. But since I wasn't feeling that connection with her, I was just annoyed, and I was like, I don't care if this girl dies. Like, I really don't give a shit. So that was one of the problems I had. Objectively, I can look at it and think this is a well-written book. It just had stylistic choices that I did not enjoy, that I did not appreciate, and so that's the main reason why this didn't work for me. The other thing is that essentially this book is written because we're reading the journal of this spy. Like, she's writing down her life story, or more like the story of her since the war started, to, in other words, reveal like secrets of like the British Armada or whatever. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because we hear so much extra stuff that no Nazi would give a shit about, that I'm like, why is she being allowed to write this? It doesn't make any sense. Finally, the other thing that was kind of strange here was that the first half of this book was pretty slow and boring to get through, and the second half we read in the perspective of another character who's actually one of the main character's closest friends. And there's just so much difference between how that first half and that second half is written. Like, things really pick up in the second half, but by that point I was so uninvested in the story that I was just getting through it in order to finish it for this readathon. Like, gladly, if I hadn't been doing this readathon, I would have DNF'd this and called it a day. I also forgot to mention that this has a plot twist at the very end, which I did not enjoy. I personally found that it took away the emotional impact of it. I thought that if we had found out about it the moment it happened, there would have been much more emotional turmoil provoked in me. But since it came at the very end and then basically just a few pages later, the book ended, I was like, why did this happen? It doesn't make sense. I don't get it. I'm just angry. So overall, this was an unpleasant experience for me. I can see why some people would enjoy it, but I'm just not one of those people. The third book I finished for this readathon was Eyes Bottled Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers by Jake Skeets. This is already one of the books that I was cheating because this wasn't in my original TBR, but I had to read it for one of my college classes, and I'm like, this has a white cover and the prompt of charms is to read a book with a white cover, so I was like, I'm gonna put this in as if I had already put it in my TBR for the OWLS, because why not? I don't have much to say about this because I don't really know how to talk about poetry collections. Just know that I rated this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and it was just a really fantastic collection. I found the themes that Jake Skeets explored in this collection very, very interesting and poignant and just very cleverly done. I really liked how he used space in his poems, like literally the space of the page. Let me see if I show you one example to at least do something. Here's one of them. I don't know. I just like how he works with space in this collection. So yeah, good time. I really enjoyed having to read it for class. That's it. The fourth book I finished was Miranda and Milan by Catherine Duckett. I read this novella for the History of Magic prompt, and essentially this is a retelling of The Tempest by Shakespeare. I still don't know quite how to explain the plot of this novella. Essentially, it's about this girl, Miranda, who was raised in an island, but finally her father gains back his lands, so she's able to move back to Milan, where she was supposed to be raised and grow up. But things are strange because everyone wants her to cover up her face because something mysterious happened with her mother, and so she looks a lot like her mother and everyone wants to like cover her up, and it's just this whole mystery of what's going on here. Why are people so scared? What has her father done to provoke this response in the people of Milan? This novella I rated 2.5 stars. This was okay, but there was nothing exceptional about it. It was pretty well written, but it had some pacing issues, which is why I gave it 2.5 stars instead of 3 stars, because it just moved really quickly. Like, I really wanted to get into the relationship between Miranda and another of the characters, but it just felt forced and rushed, and I just didn't like that. It was too fast. Like, I understand that it's a novella, and I'm not sure if The Tempest is pretty fast paced, and that's why this novella went by really fast, but I thought it would have been so much better if the author had slowed down and taken her time with the things going on in this story. Maybe it would be more enjoyable for someone who's already read The Tempest, but I still thought that even as a retelling, you're supposed to make the story engaging enough on your own that a reader that doesn't know the story would be brought in and would be invested in how you're telling it. And I just didn't have that happen in this one. Another thing I didn't enjoy about this novella was the villain. He felt very cartoonish, and like he was just made to be silly in order to sell this female empowerment narrative that I was like, if you had actually made this villain a legitimate, well-crafted villain, then the message of female empowerment would feel more natural, more part of the story. But it just felt disingenuous. It just felt like the author was trying too hard to get this message across. This is one where I saw the potential, I saw what it was trying to do, but too many things of it didn't quite work for me, and that's kind of why I just couldn't vibe with it entirely. The fifth book I picked up was A Man Called Ave by Frederick Bachman. I read this book for the Muggle Studies prompt, and in this novel, we're essentially following a grumpy old man who has recently lost his wife, and he's trying to commit suicide. But what happens is that he starts forming friendships with his neighbors and starts caring about people once again. So we love to see it. It's essentially a story about a grumpy old man finding happiness again. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well written. Frederick Bachman's writing style just really works for me. It's very humorous and snappy, and there's just something about it that I find very compelling and very fun to read through. Apart from the writing style, the main character Ove was really well written and really well developed. You really got to know him as a person and how he viewed the world and how he basically functioned. It was great. It was really great. My one complaint about this book is that the side characters could have used a bit more work. I feel like this emphasized so much on our main character that the side characters fell a bit flat and weren't quite as engaging as I would have liked them to be. But in general, I would highly recommend picking up this book. It touches upon some pretty serious topics, but I think that's obvious from the fact that the main character is trying to commit suicide from the beginning of the novel. So there's definitely trigger warnings here for like homophobia, a gay child being kicked out of their home, suicide attempts, loss of a child. There's references to like domestic abuse. So it's a pretty serious book while also mixing in pretty well with the humor and kind of dry sarcasm of Frederick Bachman's writing style in this book. So definitely worth the read. The next book I picked up for this readathon was The Abyss Surrounds Us by Emily Skrutsky. I read this one for the Defense Against the Dark Arts prompt, and essentially in this story we're following our main character who is kidnapped by pirates in order to train and raise this sea monster for battle. And it's essentially what happens during her captivity and how she bonds with the sea creature despite it being for the enemy essentially that she's training the monster. And there's also like this undercurrent of like a hate to love romance going on in the story as well. I rated this book 2.5 stars. The main reason for that is because I really saw the potential in this novel, but it just didn't quite get there. It didn't quite get to where it needed to be. This is another story where I had issues with the pacing. Some moments moved by really quickly, and sometimes it slowed down in awkward places or for scenes that didn't feel super meaningful. So it made for a story that was just strange to get through. Like I was trying to get attached to the characters and I could see how the author was trying to get us to like the characters, but it didn't quite work. I still found myself thinking the characters were pretty flat and difficult to relate to or connect to. Because of that, I didn't really buy into the romance that was trying to be developed in this novel. There was only like one scene where I legitimately felt like, okay, this makes sense. I can understand why they're interested in one another and why they may like each other. But apart from that, I was just kind of confused about their relationship. Finally, for a girl who was kidnapped by pirates, the main character hardly ever thinks about her family. And it's not like she had like this turbulent relationship with her family. So I'm like, why is this girl not thinking about her family more? Missing her home life more? Why is she so like in the moment? Like I can understand it as a like trauma response, but it's also weird to read about, I guess. I just found it confusing and strange. This is the first book in a duology though, and I do still plan to read the sequel. I do want to read more books by this author because again, I saw the potential going on here. I saw how the author could improve as a writer and write a really good story. So I want to see if she's progressed, if she's gotten better, and if I would enjoy her other stories. So I'm hoping that Emily Skrutsky follows through and writes a really incredible story. Finally, the last book I picked up for this readathon is another cheat because I didn't include it in my TBR. That book is As Flame to Smoke by Eris Adderley. I picked this up for the Transfiguration prompt, and honestly, I'm bending the rules a bit because essentially in this story, we're following a demon who's trying to tempt into sin a priest. So I put it in as Transfiguration as a shape-shifting kind of thing because the main character in the beginning of the story chooses her body, how her appearance will look while she's trying to seduce this priest. So, am I cheating? Probably. Am I still gonna put it as something that I read for this readathon and to fulfill a prompt? Yes. But yeah, this is a really short novella. It's 112 pages long. I rated this 2 stars because it was poorly written, but I had a nice time. I was like, this was fine. There was nothing phenomenal about it, and there was nothing completely terrible and horrifying about it. It was just okay. So I don't really have much else to say about it. Would I recommend you picking it up? Not really, but wouldn't hurt you if it's your kind of thing, you know? Anyway, that's it for today's video. Please let me know down in the comments below if you participated in this readathon and what your favorite read for this readathon was. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I will leave that linked down below in the description. But for now, see you next time.